When this chapter first started, I was surprised Hokazono was actually going to spend time going through and explaining to Iori who Seiichi Somura was, instead of just flashing forward to after the conversation. But it was clear to me the moment the Seitei War flashback kicked in that this is exactly why this was all done. So I just sat down and I shut up, because this brief look into the event known as the Seitei War that has been nothing but referenced up until this point is probably one of the most crucial and interesting aspects of this chapter, as, for once, we actually get a decent picture of what occurred 22 years ago, or at the very least, we get Chihiro's interpretation of what occurred. Because one thing I think is very important to keep in mind is Hirohiko's brief jab at the way Japan teaches the Seitei War, and frames the enchanted blade wielders as heroes, despite what Hirohiko implies actually occurred. An idea that what the country has been teaching and what Chihiro knows to be true, quote unquote, about the war is actually just a propagandized twist on what actually occurred. Something that is honestly all the more reinforced by Somura's actions as of late, and his blatant hatred of the quote-unquote evil that he and the other wielders that were first to commit. There is no mention of the great tragedy that Somura speaks about in Chihiro or the Masumi's rendition of the Seitei War, but that's honestly probably because they don't know anything about what this stain of history might actually be. It has, for all intents and purposes, been effectively snuffed out from the current generation's knowledge thanks to the Kamunabi's efforts. But as Chihiro explains it, 22 years ago, a random island called Shokoku appeared like a mirage out of the fog out on the southeast coast of Japan. Shokoku is the original home to the Datenseki, the crystal being used by the Shaku for super warriors, and the same material used to craft these enchanted blades. With the island of Shokoku came the natural inhabitants of the island, who, due to coexisting with the crystal and building society around it, the Datenseki crystals did not overwhelm these people's bodies, and they could wield its full power without restriction or lethal repercussions. According to Chihiro, after the island of Shokoku and its inhabitants appeared out of nowhere, that same day, the natives of Shokoku invaded Japan and started the war as a hostile foreign force. It took 1 year and 5 months for Japan to invent a countermeasure, which were the enchanted blades developed by Kunishige Rokuhira. And as the legend goes, the Swordmaster and the 5 heroes of the enchanted blades saved Japan, taking the battle to Shokoku and wiping the enemy out instantly. Just as soon as they had appeared, they were gone. Iori, having lived as far as she is concerned, a normal high school life, even considers the wielders as heroes, presumably being taught this version of history in schools. And again, while no one says that, she's wrong about this, as Iori's memories return, one vivid panel does stand out of Iori and Seiichi holding hands as father and daughter. But the reason it stands out is because once you zoom out, you can actually see he's walking Iori away from their vandalized house, graffitied with insults like murderer, killer, and sinner. While the Masumi simply brush this off as claiming not everyone agrees with war or feels the same about what needs to be done, it could be another potential clue to Hirohiko and Somura being correct that the Seitei War was actually something done unethically by the Kamunabi, and it's been covered up over the years through propaganda and erasing history. Who's to say the non-bastardized and correct version of the Seitei War is Japan being either scared of Datenseki or just wanting it plain for themselves, convincing their armies to attack just by using the excuse of invasion to justify it. It wouldn't be a surprise to me if these people were peaceful. I mean, we don't know how this relates to the Kyonagi clan, but apparently they were wiped out ruthlessly. But the one point that I will leave you on, because I just want to move on and I don't want to veer too far into headcanon because again, we just don't know, this is all predictions at this point. It is interesting to note how the only casualties we've ever heard about from the Seitei War are those caused by the enchanted blades, the Shinichi Magatsumi, Somura's claims of doing evil. We've never heard anything about Japan's side of the loss of life, right? We haven't ever heard or seen of any Seitei War veterans, at least besides the enchanted warriors, but apparently, for a year and a half, Shokoku was hostilely invading the country. And we didn't have any counters, supposedly, until the instant that Kunishige cracked the Datenseki code. It's unknown when the Kamunabi were created, what era they originated in, But it is clear that they existed during the Seitei War, or at least directly after it, because they provided the necessary resources and manpower to ensure all of the enchanted wielders and Kunishige were hidden and safe. But their primary aim as an organization is a bit suspicious. It's simply to prevent and eliminate threats to the nation. I'm not saying that they would do anything that crazy, I kinda am, but at this point it's unclear right now what the truth is. We really don't know anything about the Seitei War, and this is really our only account of the events that we can go off of. So for right now, this is just what we have to take as truth, because thinking about this too much is just going to have us end up like Iori, who after learning all of this information and having her memory seal completely shattered, faints and needs to take a rest. Chihiro takes this opportunity to practice the pure white EI style, knowing they have less than 24 hours to hone his skills and make them exceptional enough to take on threats like Kuguri, since, enchanted blades are still off the table with Somura acting as the owl eyes in the sky. Meanwhile, Milku and Sumi are hard at work on the permanent seal for Iori, having to work on the roof outside of the Bloodshed Hotel because sorcery is just frankly not allowed within, as to not create tensions between the different parties in the vicinity. Apparently, the seal is going to take them all night and they won't be able to sleep, which is going to be really funny when Iori just tells them that, hey, she doesn't need to be sealed anymore, we're all good. However, the Masumi and Chihiro have a lot less time than they thought, because without missing a single beat or chapter, the Hishaku arrive on the scene ready to stir up trouble. And according to Sumi, the Bloodshed Hotel is ran by Yojiro Sengoku, a master of the Reigen One Sword style, and all of the staff are his full-fledged disciples. On top of that, this whole place is a staple haven for the underworld, and 9 times out of 10, if you start a fight or problem in here, there is going to be a bunch of random thugs and criminals that end up getting involved just because. And you know what? Based on how Todo, the Hishaku partner with Kuguri, got incapacitated by a mere car crash, it's hard to imagine that she's going to be the one taking these people on. Which is why Todo uses her sorcery to summon Hirohiko directly into the Bloodshed Hotel, because apparently the security was too tight for him to sneak in on his own. With both arms stitched back on and ready to go, Hirohiko is more than excited to get back to work after his brief hiatus. Unfortunately, he still can't use Kumayori, his enchanted blade, but that doesn't make him any less deadlier. He brings along just a hairpin, and when one of the hotel staff aggress on the Hishaku for using sorcery, Hirohiko just easily decapitates this guy, the supposed master of the Reigen One Sword style, without even using a blade himself. And of course, now that one man's down, Hirohiko can just steal his sword and use it instead of Kumayori, planning on cutting his path all the way up to Iori Somura herself. And considering taking down the Bloodshed Hotel, nothing more than a mere accolade and a notch on his belt buckle. So, while Chihiro is honing his natural swordsmanship high up in a closed-off hotel room, Hirohiko, his clear opposite and rival at this point, refines his own down below by slaughtering true masters of a separate sword style. Meanwhile, according to Todo, Kuguri is also stalking around the outside of the hotel, meaning Chihiro now has 2 threats that are directly looking for him. It makes me question if Kuguri was able to relay that Chihiro is still alive to Hirohiko, or if it's just going to be a big surprise if Hirohiko and Chihiro actually encounter each other. It is possible that Kuguri kept it to himself since, he embarrassed himself last chapter and let everyone get away. But either way, I would love to see if Chihiro gets revealed alive and if that will influence the Hishaku or even Somura's actions from this point on. It's also possible that they can't escape without revealing the secret at all. We'll just have to wait and see how this goes next week in the next chapter, honestly. So thank you guys so much for watching. If you made it this far, I sincerely appreciate it. Make sure you hit that like button, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Peace, peace, peace.